Hello, here I am with Byron Joel in Victoria, Australia.
No,
Oh,
Western Australia, Southwestern Australia.
Southwestern Australia.
Yeah, very happy to be out of Victoria at the moment.
Yeah, because I saw on your Facebook thing that said Victoria. I was like, well, it's right in the middle of the really heavy place right now.
Does it say that? Oh, I might have to remedy that. I didn't realise.
Yeah. So where exactly? Well, approximately.
I'm in Perth, which is the capital of Southwestern Australia. So you look on the map of Australia, Western Australia, you draw a line north to south, almost near the centre of the continent, and the entire western half almost of Australia is Western Australia, which is about the size of Western Europe, with about 4 million people in it. Very, very sparse, largely semi-arid and desertified and more or less uninhabitable relative to the coastal regions. And Perth is in the very southwest, where it's an island of relative green, forested area. And there's only about, how many people in Perth now? I think there's only 1.5 million people in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very sparse area. And we are not under the kind of lockdown that we're seeing in Victoria at the moment. And now it's actually creeping. Just in the last day or two, I've seen, just watching the news and seeing, you're probably quite like me. When I watch the news, I don't sit down and look. I don't consider myself informed of what they are actually trying to get across. It's more like I sit down and say, okay, what do they want us to think and feel now?
Yeah. I've not watched the news for years. But just to quickly explain to everybody watching, you are what I would describe as a world-class permaculturist. And you and I spent some time walking around some gardens in Marrakesh about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had a memory of you playing guitar one night, walking around the corner of my house. But that's not relevant to this chat. So I've not actually seen you or spoken to you for 3 or 4 years. And I wanted to speak to you, and I appreciate you coming on, because Australia is very much the front line of all the lockdown shenanigans in the world right now. And it's quite,
yeah, it is.
I think people are pretty horrified by what they're seeing there, because there's a great deal of fear. And it seems that Australia is kind of, like everywhere, is divided between the mask wearers who do what they're told and everybody else that's going, hang on, this isn't right. So I'd be interested to know what the temperature is like there in that respect from your point of view.
Yeah. Where to begin? So firstly, again, I'm in in Perth in southwestern Australia. Western Australia now has a hard border being put up for any international, but also interstate travel. So again, it's very sparse, and southwestern Australia is almost like an island, because Perth is the most isolated capital city on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very far away from Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane on the East Coast. And we have a kind of history of weathering economic and cultural storms because of our isolation. To this point, it's proven to be beneficial. It may not in the future, but Victoria is the hard lockdown at the moment. Stage 4 lockdowns. Still no real clarity as to the end date. They're not really that clear on explicitly sharing the models that they're using. It's pretty damn draconian. There's 23 hours a day, house arrest, more or less, 1 hour a day exercise. The government can go into your house whenever you want. I believe they can legally take your kids off you. There's a bloody long list. There's a whole suite of lockdown measures that they have implemented. And as of about 3 or 4 days ago, the Victorian Parliament, not the people, but the Parliament, voted 20-19 in favour of extending those emergency powers for another 6 months.
Well,
in a world where the mortality rate is somewhere up around the 96. Yeah, the survival rate is at 96.7% plus. So there's something very odd going on. I wish it was, I mean, and I'm someone who follows this kind of stuff with a skeptical, almost kind of esoteric Jungian symbolist eye. And even I find it tricky to figure out exactly what's going on. There's a number of different kind of potential threads. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's not even the common cold. So from that perspective, with official figures, it's fascistic at the very least. And you know, I've known for quite a long time, or through the work that the studying that I've done, that Australia is quite famous as like the testing ground for the Illuminati type thing and Satanism. I think there was a famous quote from someone I read a few years ago saying, yeah, because of the outback, there's the bodies buried all over the place because it's so easy to hide things there. That's my perspective. I'm not saying that we're diving straight into that. You know, I'm just interested really more in, because I know that we've had esoteric conversations in the past. We've also had conversations about UFOs and things like that in the past, which we may or may not talk about today. But it was really about what's the feeling on the ground of the people in Australia. I mean, these are really draconian. I always find the word draconian interest, by the way, because it's made up of the word Draco at the beginning.
Indeed.
But these draconian measures, it's pretty worrying for people, I guess. Or are they seeing it as like, oh, the government's doing a great thing, keeping us all safe? You know, what's
yes, the majority. Australians are interesting because, of course, we're very young culturally. And I don't know how much you want to get into the cultural history of Australia, but ostensibly, like, everyone knows that Australia was a penal colony, a colonial prison. Okay. Mm. But the word slave isn't used often when describing the Australian people, but understand that the genesis of the Australian proletariat was one of, I once visited the USA. I was doing a talk at a conference. There was an African-American woman that I was speaking with, and she asked me to describe the basics of Australian history. So I did so. And at the end of the story, she was crying. And I thought, oh God, what have I done? I've put my foot in it somehow. And she said, hang on a minute, let me get this straight. So the genesis, the kind of founding narrative of your people is that you were taken from the streets of your homeland, put in the hulls of large wooden ships for 8 months, fed brackish water and rotten bread. And those who survived found themselves in an alien landscape where they were used as slave labor to build infrastructure for the empire until they died.
That's a powerful sentence.
Yeah, well, and me and my other Australian mate there kind of looked at each other and nodded like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And then she said, hang on a minute, that's not exactly the same, but it's analogous to the African-American narrative, story, history. And in that moment, a massive penny dropped. Ooh. So Australians, unlike the Americans whose cultural identity is founded on an idea of liberation from tyranny, and they won a war for it. They fought a war, and the active kind of rebellion, the revolutionaries were in a vast minority, and they still kicked the English's ass. The Americans have this proud, like, don't fuck with us, don't tell us what to do. And some people, that's been painted as being a very kind of like brutish, primitive, kind of like hyper masculine thing. And Australians need a whole lot more of that, because Australians are still, we haven't come to terms with the fact that we are an enslaved headspace. And we tell ourselves that we are very kind of anti-establishment and egalitarian, and we are when we're by ourselves around the bar or the campfire, you know, but as soon as authority actually steps up, we quiver. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And that's what's happening now. I'm seeing that occur now, where the vast majority of Australians are just towing the line. Even amongst my friends who are all very like intelligent people, and they follow politics, and there's some, you know, historically literate to a degree. The majority of them, it hasn't even dawned on them that there's something odd going on with COVID and the numbers and the relatively heavy-handed is an understatement measures. There is a movement, you know, there are people on Facebook, there are the people who are more kind of libertarian minded, there are those who question things anyway. To those people, and this speaks of what's happening in the world right now, it's like there is a split occurring where I don't know if it's because, I mean, I was born seeing things differently. I just am. I've never believed the lie. I've just always seen the puppet show for what it is. It took me some time to develop a language to describe it, but I've always seen it. And I've been paying attention to this stuff for a long time. So, you know, 9/11, anyone who's done this study on that, as soon as something big like this comes along, you're already watching it very suspiciously and skeptically. Yeah. So to myself and to those like me, it is so blatantly, resoundingly obvious that something is up, that the official narrative is a cover for something else. As to what is exactly occurring, well, that's why we're talking. But there are those who, there's like those who see it so resoundingly, obviously, and just gobsmacked and smacking their heads against a brick wall that other people can't see it. And then there are those who just don't see it. It's quite telling.
Oh, it's extraordinary. And I think the clock is ticking in that respect. And we could, you know, there are, what are the theories that you've heard, and you know, what are your feelings about what's actually going on? Because the elephant in the room in the conversation right now is the massive network of tunnels that are being taken out and children being rescued. So have you heard that side of things?
I have heard it, and I place that in a kind of category in my head where I haven't seen proof of it, but there's lots of things I haven't seen proof of that I go around from day to day basing my reality on. But it lines up with stuff I've been hearing for years and years and years. Like that's the thing. The greater kind of what's been called conspiratorial narrative that's come out at the moment, and everything surrounding the story of the elites and kids and all of it, it's not new. This didn't just come out all of a sudden with COVID. This is stuff that I've been reading since I was 20. So 20 years now. 21, I was 21, I think, when I first started learning about the connection between the elites and child sacrifice and Satanism and all of the rest. And I lost friends over that back then because it was so fringe. There was no one to speak to.
Yeah, me too.
And it kind of caused a split in my being. I was living in two worlds. I never really believed the lie, but there was a part of me that when it's never reflected back to you by 99.99% of the people around you or the culture you're in, then it kind of causes a split. And it did my head in for a long time. But getting back to your original question, this is stuff we've been hearing about for a very long time. It's not new. It's just that information is being shared. That narrative is being fostered and augmented and brought to the surface. As for the underground stuff in Australia, it's not common knowledge, but anyone who has done any bit of sniffing around knows that because of Australia's vast space, largely inhospitable, there's a lot of military bases, right?
There's a lot of American bases, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, well, they are all on paper Australian American bases, which nowadays might not be such a bad thing, but previous to the current administration, that there's no consolation in them being American. They are what they are. Dumbs are dumbs, and but they're around. And there's been lots of talk for a very long time about the tunnels in between them and whatnot. So I file it under one of those things that resonates with a lot of things that I've seen and heard and thought myself in the past. But again, on a day-to-day walking around, seeing it with my own eyes kind of thing. I can't say one way or the other.
Well, it's about 4:30 a.m. here. Where is it? What time is it there, by the way? Is it 12 hours?
Nearly midday.
Okay. And I only had a few hours sleep because I came across a viral video from Australia last night by a woman called JCK, which has had like 60,000 views in like a few days. And she's from Australia, and she does astral projection. And she put up this amazing video saying that she'd seen into the centre of Australia and under, I don't know, I sent the video to you, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but she said she went underground, and there was, I'm getting goosebumps reciting it, but she said there was this huge whirlpool, and she said it was literally like hell underneath Australia, with this whirlpool and this line of kids being consumed by mythical monstrous creatures like minotaurs and giants and nasty demonic entities, and it's quite compelling. And obviously what I find interesting about what she's put out there is that it's been taken up by so many people worldwide. There's a connection to what she's saying. People are connecting with it, and it does seem to me that there's very much a large spiritual opening up going on with people that might, a bit like you, who've known about stuff like this for a long time, but had to keep it kind of quiet because there was nobody to speak to about it. And I fall into that category as well. And I fall into the category of somebody that was extremely brainwashed to being extremely open. And before our call, I was outside looking for UFOs, for example, and I do that all the time. And most of the things I've been doing on this channel since I started have been about demons and spiritual awakenings and all that kind of stuff, because I'm fascinated by it, and I've got my own journey in that respect as well. And I think it's really important that people are opening up to that kind of thing, however crazy it sounds, because this is the craziest of times any of us have ever lived in.
Indeed.
So the reason I brought that up is because I did send that video to you just out of interest, because that video to me is the real zeitgeist of what's going on from an Australian. And I was wondering, if you had a chance to look at that, what your thoughts of that?
Yeah, I did have a look at it. Where do I begin? So what I see occurring is, again, this narrative is very old, and it's been something that's been on the underground for the last 20 years. And with the help of it's pre-internet, but with the help of the internet, lots of dots were connected and lots of details were fleshed out. Apart from a greater discussion occurring and greater sharing of ideas, it seems to me that, like, what was once maybe considered metaphor, is being considered potentially to be more and more literal. So it starts off with like this idea of an Illuminati, a cabal, and the elite, and them being kind of controlling the place and being depraved, and then it's that throw in the magic and throw in the kind of metaphysical stuff, and then you throw in the literal, like cannibalism and pedophilia and the idea of the reptilian, which I've always thought, well, maybe is it just the human collective mind trying to work its way through this thing with symbolism, right? Reptilian, cold, kind of machine-like, emotionless, lack of empathy. But now it's gaining this more and more of a literalism to it. Now I don't know, when at the end of the day, when the curtains part and we look back in retrospect, how much of it's going to be literal and how much of it's symbolic. I don't know. As to her visions, spirit's real, right? To me, and this is if there's one thing that people need to sit down and have a good, long, hard think about, it's the follies of materialism as a philosophical position. It's the thing that's got us in the most trouble. It's the thing that's killing us, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our souls, and the planet we're on. This idea that this Descartesian split between mind and spirit, and then a denial of spirit. So like we're just fucking Newtonian clockwork flesh suits, orphaned by some mindless, heartless universe with no meaning. So to me, spirit is real, and we've lost. I mean, you don't have to turn the clock that far back to see traditions all over the world. All of them, virtually without exception, pre-industrial revolution, were spiritualist or animist to some degree. Their cosmology was a animated, enchanted, alive one, right? And then that's gone and it's been killed, and then but actively killed. See, I don't think it may be, this is all part of some necessary organic process in the evolution of a system like Earth, maybe. But to me, it appears to be there's been an active malevolent campaign to disenchant the human worldview and to sever the human from its connection with self, other, spirit, and the earth. And that's what's got us into the trouble we're in now. And when I see the rolling out of modernity, frankly, and I see it around here, Southwest Australia a lot, which was until relatively recently a wilderness. And now it's just like this cookie cutter machine of just the ugliest, tackiest industrial shit everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. But to me, it's a campaign, right? It's not just like, the Vatican, Europe expanded around the world, and the Vatican, sent missionaries off, and they just happened to be assholes, and the indigenous just happened to get smallpox, and then we lost all their cultural artifacts. It's like, no, it was an active malevolent campaign to sever the indigenous human from their connection with the planet, because once you've got that done, you've got them by the balls.
Mm-hmm.
And Australia is the world-class kind of showboat flagship example of that, where you've got the world's oldest continuous culture on the planet, who are so enchanted, if I may speak for them, this is my understanding of them, so enchanted, so symbolist, but not symbol, it's animist. Everything was alive, everything had personhood, everything could be communicated with and deserved respect, and sometimes a healthy degree of fear as well, because you just don't know what kind of energies and spirits are out there floating around. And then along comes empire, in the form of the British imperial, colonial arm, and severs it. Like Australia 250 years ago, 300 years ago, was a different universe, and it's gone. There's a lingering thread of it, but what's happened in Australia, the gravity and breadth of what has occurred in Australia over the last few hundred years, generations, is enough to make me, this sounds heavy, but it's so profound and deep and intense and tragic that it's actually enough now and then to make me question whether there is any inherent benevolence sewn into the fabric of reality. I do think there is, but it's huge. So Australia is this place where it's vast, it has great natural resource, and the slate has been wiped clean. You have an decimated indigenous culture, and then you have a colonial culture. Contemporary European Australia has gone through its own severing from self and heritage and land, right? So, there's the old joke, the difference, what's the difference between yogurt and Australians? Well, yogurt can develop a culture in 200 years. Australians, we don't have one. We sort of do, but in terms of real connection, meaningful connection to country and self and spirit, this place is as materialist and empty, spiritually empty. It saddens me to say. So it's actually like, you could see why it would be perfect for empire to do what they want to do. And I've long heard that there is a plan to shift from, Babylon to Rome, Rome to London, London to Washington, Washington to Canberra. The plan, I think, was to, it's at least a major regional centre.
Oh, well, I think that's fairly obvious. And you've heard of that city in Kazakhstan, have you? Which is...
Oh, yeah. Yep. I forget its name, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I remember what it's called, but it's all built with this massive symbolism, Illuminati Masonic symbolism, that was going to be the headquarters from the new Silk Road that they built from Wuhan down the Yangtze River, which was basically the route for the children being transported. You put that brilliantly, and I couldn't agree more. It's pretty fucking harsh situation we're in, and you and I have 8 children between us, and I think that that's the only reason why we're having this chat and putting it on YouTube, because we have to do something. And I think that's an interesting question. I said to you before this call, I want my kids to look back and say, I did something, because for me, it's very, very simple right now. We're either going to go carry on down the road that you're going down in Australia at the moment, and that's the end of the human race, or something is going to happen and we're going to get out of this and look back on it and get rid of this dark element, whatever that may be, that's afflicting this realm, this planet. And then, if we get through that side, then the kind of work that you do is going to be even more and more important, I think, because we've got to go back to being in tune with nature. I'm talking specifically about your how to grow food and organize our relationship to food and plants and stuff. But
indeed,
what else, from your point of view, Byron, this is obviously going to come into a spiritual realm here. I understand that we create our own reality. And one of the things that I've been exploring with myself over the last few years is my natural instinct is to get up and, I want to fight the enemy, right? I just want to, where do I throw the punch? But we can't do that. This is not the Second World War versus a great big machine, where you go and get slaughtered on a beach. This seems to be an internal war, for want of a better term, a spiritual war. What do you think about that idea?
Indeed. I mean, was it in the Bible somewhere where they said Armageddon shall be fought in the air? The air being symbol for the intellect, the mind. And it's all about, it's a war for the mind at the moment. I mean, spirit and body and all the other faculties have a big part of it. But I mean, tomorrow, if everyone woke up and suddenly, if we could click our fingers and wave a magic wand, and all we had to do was to render every human on the planet able to observe and deduce the truth of what's going on, it would be over. And I mean, we can't fight physically. I mean, it's a David and Goliath battle if we're going to go down that road. I hope what's happening now never turns into a hot war of any type. I mean, that would be the worst possible outcome. I don't believe it will either. I actually am really hopeful.
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well.
We're just in a very turbulent period right now. But in saying that, though, we are neck and neck, like it's the fork in the road right now, and the danger is that the majority of people don't see how how dangerous it is potentially right now. I mean, we're seeing the rolling out now of basically, I think China, basically, to go straight to it, is the kind of on the ground testing site for the, like I don't throw biblical language around lightly, but like a satanic, totalitarian, smart state. You look at the social credit system over there. And then this is what scares me about 5G. I mean, forget any kind of radiation or EMF issues. It's what technology it facilitates. I mean, you can have your totalitarian surveillance state if you have your 5G, and that's what it's about. I mean, shit. Do you need more powerful internet? I don't need more powerful internet. I don't have one of those Alexa, Amazon, or Google Home thingies, but I mean, how much more convenient and swift do you need the internet? Well, you don't. The average person doesn't. What we need internet for is AI, or the closest we have to it now. Smart states, surveillance states, the Internet of Things.
You brought up a ton of subjects there. I mean, firstly, communism in China has killed more people than anything else in the history of the world, and and communism was created and run as an arm of the Rothschild, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, cabal. I've noticed that 5G is another sort of, I'm going to try and talk about 5G, but you did bring up the Chinese, because something that is, I've noticed a lot of Australians are saying is, like, there's shitloads of Chinese coming in with planes left, right and centre, and helicopters, and like to implement this stuff. But then on the other side, on the flip side of that, I'm seeing people saying, well, yeah, that is the Chinese or whatever, but they're actually coming in to help with the tunnel excavation. The fact is, none of us actually know.
We don't know.
Which is why I brought up JCK, because I think we're going to have to go inward to work this stuff out. On the 5G thing, have you, what was the 5G situation there? Are you seeing it being implemented? Because something interesting about where I am in Ireland is that there was this big 5G rollout happening at the start of March, but I happen to know a guy that is very well respected in the telecommunications industry, and this is a small country, right? So I'd be ringing him every few days saying, what's going on with the 5G? And he'd say, oh, it's not happening. And we go, what do you mean it's not happening? This was in the middle of the pandemic when I was, and he said, it's just not happening. It's all been fiber optics now. And then you've got these stories about, in fact, the video from JCK did talk about, I think at the end, about I think she said the last of the Tesla towers has been installed in 2023. That was her vision. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, why is it 2023? Because it's taken a long time for these Tesla towers. So I have heard that the 5G implementation is actually being replaced with Tesla towers that are going to vibrate at a harmonic 432 hertz frequency, which is like the God frequency, which then enables us to live in harmony, which is probably what you get from walking through the forest anyway. So I brought up a few things there. What do you think about those?
Of course, there was the kind of big media push for 5G. Look, I don't have this mapped out perfectly in my head, but it feels like it was halfway through last year. It was kind of like, okay, it's happening, get ready for it. And there was all the, pros and cons, and the pushback from the, crazy hippie conspiratorial paranoid people everywhere. And I remember looking up on the map, trying to find the maps for it online, and I was surprised to discover how few there were in Western Australia. So like, yes, it's isolated here and the population's rather small, but don't get me wrong, Perth is a very modern city. You can get anything you want anytime. It's very modern. If you're downtown there, you could be downtown anywhere. And I was surprised to see how few there were. I can't speak to over East, but and this is just my gut, it does seem to either the attention's been taken off it because COVID, or there has been a slowing down of that implementation. And this is, there does feel like there has been a interruption to the rolling out of this plan.
Yeah,
It feels like there's something in the way, like there's a rushing and there's a stumbling, and there is I don't know if they weren't expecting the pushback, or, as I'm sure you're well versed in, and what I hope is happening, what I cross my fingers and fucking pray is occurring, is that there is actually some force, spiritual, human, military, government, or otherwise, that is pushing back on this. And I suspect there is, but I just have to file that in the category of I'm not sure. Well, not for lack of looking and not for lack of thinking about it, but...
No, but I do think there was this big push with 5G. Then it has just kind of gone quiet. And I find that really encouraging. And as I've looked into this, I mean, what is a virus, right? It is an exosome that is produced in the body as a reaction to overtoxification. And the more you look into it, the more obvious it is that things like radar cause, like the Spanish flu, that to me makes far more sense, combined with the vaccines that they were doing back in 1918. And I subscribe to the theory that the 5G was going to be used as a weapon to activate this strain that would have combined with the vaccination. And I've known for a long time that the plan was to kill 6.5 billion people, because the Georgia Guidestones said, let's keep 500 million people in perpetuity, and all that bullshit that they put on that granite statue. And that was the plan. And I don't think the plan's happening, but I think that it's difficult when you're in it. I mean, I'm finding it extremely difficult this week because the kids have decided to go to school because they want to see their friends. But, my son got back from his new school yesterday. I was like, how was your first day? And he was like, well, to be honest, it was a bit shit. And I was like, why? And he goes, well, because I was like this all day, because I was muzzled all day and people weren't really talking to each other much. And, it's fucking child abuse as far as I'm concerned, what's going on in schools. And this has to end soon. If anybody's watching this is getting on with this job, can you just hurry up? Because I want the fucking schools to go. Well, I want to go actually, but
the debt that we are going to have to repay to our children's generation, not just economically, although I hope that things are going to be coming that make that not a non-issue, but the psycho-spiritual debt that we're going to have to pay for, or at least they're going to have to be dealing with, is already immense. And I hope that they are just somehow prepared, that they've chosen to come here at this time, and they're equipped with certain faculties that enable them to get through it without being totally screwed up afterwards. But lots of other generations have gone through seriously hard times, and it builds character. So maybe this is all just character building.
It just pisses me off because I thought we got through all of that crap, and here they are having to do the same.
I'm fucking bored with it, frankly. I'm just bored with it now. I'm like, especially, doing what I do, I have spent my adult life more or less studying permaculture and regenerative agriculture and culture and ecology and anthropology and all those things. And I know, and I've seen it with my own eyes, I know what we can do. I know the goddamn fucking paradise that we could create and live in. And it's not idealism, and it's not a utopian vision. I mean, there's always going to be struggle, there's always going to be challenge, but we need so little to live happy, prosperous, satisfying, stimulating, enriching, meaningful lives. We need so little to do so. And it something that's occurred to me in only the last kind of year or two was the degree to which it's the predatory system that sucks the life out of us. Now, I would have given that lip service for a very long time. I would have been able to say that and agree with it. But the system is so goddamn parasitic in so many ways. It's so stifling and suffocating, and it suffocates the human imagination and soul and joy de vie. And it's not just the system as well. This is this other thing that I've been thinking of for a long time, actually, is this idea of an actual psycho-spiritual, magical emission of some kind of frequency or spell. That is, it is the primary means by which we are kept in the state that we're in, and why our powers of observation are so poor. It's like that humanity has a blind spot, right? We just do. We have a blind spot. We're not rational, logical creatures. We're not. We actually, that's why science was so powerful as a methodology, because it enabled us to step by step, check for biases, check for contradictions, etc., because we're not good at that. We have a big blind spot. Now, I have a feeling that at very least that blind spot has been weaponized by an agency who knows us inside out, and not just the ways in which we think we need to know ourselves, body, emotion, mind, but on a totally different ontological strata. They know us inside out. But that blind spot, I think, is actually being augmented. So instead of it just being this natural proclivity away from rationality or reason and observation and deduction, that's actually been weaponized and turned up. And our heart space, that ability to just feel, occasionally you'll have like just a morning, or, and it's fresh and the sky is blue and there's a golden champagne effervescent twinkling of the sun and the birds are singing. Sometimes it's just a moment. It's like, oh, fuck, that's lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Now, that's our native state. That's our native state, I submit. And everything that fucking squashes that down and keeps us tight in the chest and anxious and tunnel vision and worrying in the background. Now, there is the kind of nuts and bolts propaganda, day after day after day, fear campaign. That what's the Pink Floyd lyrics? The paper holds their folded faces to the floor, and every day the paper boy brings more. Just that constant fucking remember to be afraid, remember to worry. There's the propaganda, but there's also, I suspect, an actual spell / frequency emission coming from somewhere.
It's all about frequency. Magic is 100% real, but that's all about frequency and intention. And I believe it's something to do with the planet Saturn and the moon. And I think that is the technology that is being used against us. And I also think that they understand us far better than we remember what we understand, and that we create this reality. So they're beaming this information in, comes into the pineal gland. The kingdom of heaven is in the third area of the brain, left between the left and the right. And then we're projecting the reality that they want us to create.
Yeah, that's when the curtains part, it's swift enough. And even if we do, let's say that tomorrow at midday, the veil drops, and that frequency falls out, right? Yeah. Now, that's a blessing, but it could actually send people insane, because what's actually going to occur is it's not just waking up tomorrow and realizing that politics is a little bit deeper than you thought it was. It's actually the metaphysics, the foundation of our metaphysical universe is complete. It's a 180 inversion on the reality of how things work. And that's been weaponized. Magic has been Disneyified. Yeah. The Disneyfication of magic, where it's just this silly juvenile make-believe fantasy shit, pulling rabbits out of hats and, make-believe. What a better way to keep a population removed from and ignorant of their own power while saving it for yourself.
Yeah. Did you hear Trump say burst of light? Have you heard that expression?
No, I haven't.
I was listening, when the pandemic started, I was listening to every one of his, I was staying up late listening to every single one of his press conferences, because I know he talks in code, and I was really fascinated by what kind of code he was saying. But he said, and I've mentioned this on a couple of videos on this channel, when this is over, it's going to be like a burst of light. And he repeated it, a burst of light. Then he dropped the mic and walked off the stage. And I was like, I think I know what he's talking about. And I think he knows. I think that whatever people think of Trump who's watching this, he's working on an esoteric level. There's no question in my mind. If you read Q, there's no question that that is a real thing. And I think when you talk about the passing of the veil, that's exactly what we're heading for. We're heading, because there's this solar flare that's supposed to be happening in the December the 22nd, 23rd, and the date. This is all prophesized. This is in the Hopi prophecy of the eagle and the condor. This is the time we're in. We're at the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, and we're going through these processes to get rid of. And there's this promised golden age. And although some people will think that sounds absolutely bonkers, I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into that, and everything for me internally is pointing towards that, which is why I have this sense of optimism, which I think we might be saying the same thing in different ways, but
I have an optimism that I'm really, as concerned as I often sound, I do have a real gut innate optimism, which I'm really grateful for. In saying that, though, like if humanity is to continue functioning as it has been over the last, generations, centuries, millennia, using the same tools, using only the same tools and methods that we've been using, then we're screwed. So I've thought about this a lot, and unless the human oversoul and or the planet and or the solar system, the galaxy, spirit, God, the universe, what have you, unless it has some kind of like card up its sleeve and something is shifting or going to shift at some foundational or very, very influential level, again, at some ontological strata that we don't actually have a mapping for yet. But unless that happens, I don't see anything changing. It's just going to be, so who was it that said history is just one damn thing after another?
Yeah.
Right. Now it's going to continue to be, unless something deeply shifts from within the human being.
100%.
And I pray that happens sooner than later. I do believe it's happening. I just pray it happens sooner than later.
Well, me too, mate. And that seems like a good spot to end this call on. But I'd love to catch up with you again in a few weeks, because I think the next few weeks are going to be massive in Australia and worldwide. So if you're up for that,
by all means. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, let's do it.
No, I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon.
You're welcome. Thanks, mate.
Okay. Cheers.
Ta-da.